Silence. Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris. It is free to say, I actually don't care. Ooh. He's almost a school shooter. Dude, this is awesome. This guy just LARPed about being a school shooter. He like daydreamed about it. And he said, well, I actually was almost a school shooter. Now they're going to pay attention to me. Dude, this is awesome. Well, are you ready to hear the longest 2-hour sob story you've ever heard from a loser?
So, Mr. Stark, you turned your life around.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go back to when it wasn't turned around.
I almost did something bad. But I didn't. Bro, only in America, only in the matriarchy could we have this. And the matriarchy isn't really matriarchy. It's weak men being controlled. Now, women being made miserable and controlled by evil men, allowed to lead by weak men. That's really what it is. It's weak men, evil men, and women being abused. That's really what the matriarchy is. Because we're not really in a matriarchy. Because you. Dude, Paul, every stream you saying how much you're almost rich off of Solana. Give me some money, dude. I'm almost rich.
Now, you've been touring around and talking to people for how long? How long have you been in the public eye?
Voice docs, yeah, dude. I'm the leading this VOD immediately after it's done.
5 years.
About 5 years. How old are you now?
44.
Okay, and so, well, why don't you just tell us the story, and then I'll start delving into
maybe time you out,
the
guys.
details.
Well, so I was almost a school shooter when I was really young. I went through a really violent, aggressive family. My first 5 years are like living in a Stephen King movie. My birth father was the most violent, depraved person.
Dude. Let me guess. Single mother, divorced. Dad was horrible because he was evil. Raised by a single mom, became a beta male. Wants to emulate his dad, but can't. This is what I talked about earlier. Wants to emulate his dad, but can't because guess what? His mom has castrated him. And now he's a woman in a man's body. And he got the estrogen match because he got fat, which makes you have more estrogen. And now he's a woman.
I've ever met. Beatings and rapes and just...
Beatings and rapes, yeah, okay. Ever heard of marriage law, dude?
Violence and aggression the entire time, running from him across state to state, trying to get away. When my mom finally escaped him, got with my stepdad and went from Stephen King to Scarface. So it went from extreme violence to crack cocaine and crime.
And you were about 6 at that
I was
point?
about 5 or 6.
Dude, you can't get away from it, bro. Raised by 2 legends. Still just a beta male. That would suck. Raised by 2 epic legends. You just become a beta male.
6 at the time, yeah. And I had an older brother who's 2 years older than I was. And
He's like, I know there's a lot of rapes going on because I was 5 years old. And definitely I remember all that because it's definitely real.
so we were very nomadic.
But I'm sure
I went
there
to
was
30 or
abuse,
40
but
different
it's all
schools. I was
pathological
constantly
lying.
moving from state to state, running away from the cops or the social workers.
He
or
exaggerates about
counselors
this. I wonder if he
anybody
exaggerates
trying to
about this.
intervene, and lived a very nomadic lifestyle, and went from early on being a really shy, sensitive, sweet kid to like reading comic books and superheroes and,
Really?
and that kind of
I would
stuff.
have never
to,
guessed.
in my early teen years, really adapting that to the way to survive was I'm going to be the aggressive one. I knew I figured out early on that I was the dirty one. I
He's like, I'm Rorschach in The Watchmen.
was the nasty one. I was the worthless. I was the outcast. I was the one that
A
was
lot of
pushed
people
off.
Rorschach's a bad guy, but I liked him.
6, 7 years old. My older
So you were
brother.
assuming it was you.
Oh,
This
yeah,
man's a
it was
murderer of the buffet table. This man goes into Golden Corral about to commit a crime.
me.
Yeah.
My older brother is 2 years older than I was. Because of my family dynamic, he had a lot of responsibility. He had to be the early man of the house really early on, to the extent where he had, at 12 years old, had to handle the sheriff throwing all of our stuff in the front lawn and evicting us when my parents are getting drugged out and drunk at the bar and we can't find him for days. And he has to find us a place to stay. And I was the responsibility.
How much
he had to
older
take
than you
care of.
was he?
2 years. So he was 12, I was 10. And so he was just another kid going through abuse the same way I was. But he
shot
had to, I was a responsibility he had to take care of. So while he was shouldering all the responsibility, I'm like
Ball, the glass and
burden. And so that was kind of the identities we adapted. He was the one that took care of everything. I was the one that was the broken thing that needed to be taken care of all the time. And as that grew older, I became more and more toxic going into my early teen years.
Why do you think there wasn't enough responsibility also?
You can always tell people go to therapy. You can always tell when people have like therapists. This guy, like, this is like, therapist comes in, zones out for about 60 minutes. This guy talks for about 60 minutes and leaves.
For you, like, why do you think the roles between you and your brother had to be split that way?
I don't know if they had to be, but that's just kind of the way they ended up being. Just because of our personalities, he was more of a hands-on kid. He's
older too.
Well, he was a gearhead too. His likes were more physical. He liked doing things like
more
building things, taking stuff apart, fixing cars, stuff like that. I was more intellectual. I liked reading and loved. I would read like the Bullfinch's mythology textbook when I was 4 or 5 years old. My first book report was on Stephen King's Misery when I was in kindergarten, and because I read really early on, like super early. I was reading full books by the time I was 5 years old, and so I was sucking in from
I read like Lord of the Rings when I was 2 months old.
So that was my escape. My escape when all the crime and the violence and people beating each other and digging through crack rock behind me was going on. I would have my nose dug into an X-Men comic book. My brother would be
comic books.
into taking apart his skateboard, putting a skateboard back together.
Right, so he was
cracked up.
Doing
Dude, if your brother was taking apart skateboards and putting them back together for hours, he was doing crack, dude.
practical things.
Practical things in the world.
He would take apart like microwaves.
As that grew older, he was the one that had to do like, well, the car's broken and Jake's gonna try to fix it.
He'd be digging around wall sockets.
This thing's busted. Jake's gonna fix it. I didn't fix anything. I was off to the side reading a book. I was out. Like I wasn't.
He was older and more practically oriented.
I wasn't utilitarian to anything.
Okay, so you said you were a sweet kid, but that things started to change. Well, maybe about when you were 10, if I got that right.
Oh, earlier.
Once I had testosterone, all of a sudden I started acting different.
I'd say 7, 8, 9. Yeah, I because of the way that we moved, we were constantly moving from Colorado to Oregon, back and forth, and this was the late 80s. So it was before the age of the internet. It was really easy to make up your entire personality and make up a whole new identity. So my parents would get a job in a house here in Colorado and then get evicted, lose their job, move to Oregon, lie about their entire resume, lie about their entire history, get an entirely new house and everything, and then wash, rinse, repeat every couple of months.
Right.
And so we were always moving back and forth.
And they were doing that so that their scams could continue?
It was either their scams could continue or they would evade accountability. They were trying to.
So that sort of behavior is generally.
What do you do for a job?
Rarer among women. You said your
what do you do as a job?
Fairly
Not a
nasty
job,
piece of
sir.
work.
Yes.
And so, did you have any sort of quality relationship with your mother or your father?
At that time, yes. Early on with my father, yes. My mom at that time was much more like Linda Hamilton.
Are you employed, sir?
Okay, I don't.
The Terminator. Like, she was the survivalist mother who, like, to the point where when my father was so violent and chasing us around, we were bouncing from battered woman shelter to battered woman shelter to get away from him. And my mom would have things like safety words. So if we were out and about, if she just said the word pocket in conversation, that was a safety tag. So she could be at the grocery store and be like, oh, $2.95, here we go, pocket. If that word came out of her mouth, I was to grab the back pocket of her pants and we needed to get out right now. That meant my father was in sight. There was trouble. We need to go now. We need to move. And so it was that kind of survivalist.
And that was the first 5 years?
First 5 years of my life.
So why do you think your mother stayed with your father during that 5-year period?
During that 5-year period, I think that from my stories that I heard, he was a Vietnam vet. And when he left to go to the war, he was a good guy. When he came back, he was kind of a monster.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was, I guess they were together.
Was she with him before he went to Vietnam?
She was.
Okay, she had already established a relationship with him. Then damaged by the war.
Who was then damaged by the war, came back and was completely a monster and was just violent and got into, he was epically violent.
What was he hurt physically? Do you know during the war?
He wasn't hurt physically during the war. I don't think. I know he was hurt psychologically during the war.
Do you know why? Do you know what happened?
He was a gunner on a ship. He was one of the ones that would load the bomb.
He was in Apocalypse Now.
Ammunition to shoot up into Cambodia, and he was on the ship, and one of his best friends got his head taken off right next to him, just the ammunition blew his best friend away right next to him, and that messed him up. But that pales in comparison to the trauma he suffered from his family. My father, from his own family, was circumcised at 15 years old.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Okay, epic. It's called you didn't bathe. You get circumcised at 15 and you didn't bathe and your skin's clots up. I want to know how? Never mind.
Exactly.
They circumcised him. They cut off the foreskin of his penis at 15 years old because they caught him masturbating.
I see.
Good
So
idea.
that's just an example of the abuse that my father went through. So that's abuse, in my opinion, is generational.
Yeah.
It's trauma that rolls downhill, and from both sides of my family, there were giant boulders of trauma that were rolling downhill. From my father's side, there was that. From my mother's side, I had a pedophile great grandfather, a pedophile uncle, rapist.
He married this 18-year-old woman when he was 25. So pedophile match.
There was a lot of violence and
King
aggression on
Redditor.
both
He's
sides.
just like, raised by narcissists. My grandpa was a pedophile. He met my grandma when she was 16 in church.
On
And a
both
lot of,
sides.
and a
What
lot
about
of repression.
alcoholism?
Lots of alcoholism, mental disorders, a lot of personality disorders, a lot of drug abuse. Yeah.
Yeah, well, patterns of behavior are imitated, right?
Generationally. Are you a
Consciously
pedophile,
and
sir?
unconsciously. And what that means is that if there is a pattern of pathology in a family, it will echo down the generations until someone digs into the underbelly of
You know what I get? Now I get why Jordan Peterson thinks he's a genius when he's retarded. Is that he's like a psychologist, right? And so when you're a psychologist and people come to talk to you, if you're doing the therapy, if you're a therapist, psychologist, or whatever fake job, you're talking to people about themselves. And so you say like retarded stuff, and people are like, yeah, that's right. Because you're talking about them. I think you're this. I think you're that. And then the person sitting across from you is like, you're right. You're right. I am that way.
the problem,
And therapy works.
sorts it out and stops it. And then,
I'm
at
not
least
saying
in
therapy doesn't work.
principle,
Therapy works.
that'll stop the intergenerational transmission. There
That's what
are
I try-
genetic predispositions, but they're complex, eh? So you can have a genetic predisposition to depression, which would mean that you're likely to be higher in the trait neuroticism, which is a trait associated with negative emotion. There are also heritable tendencies towards antisocial
Or I like
personality.
more like Jewish.
So if you're extroverted and disagreeable,
Me.
and even
I'm
worse,
dark
if you're
triad.
extroverted, disagreeable,
I'm Dark Tetrad and on Demon Troll.
and unconscientious, if you take a pathological turn, you'll tilt likely in a criminal direction. And some of that
Me.
has a heritable element too. It doesn't mean that wrongdoing or the proclivity for criminal behavior is heritable precisely. It means that we inherit different patterns of trait.
Dude, this is so funny. Dick Masterson. I like Dick Masterson. He can be retarded, but every once in a while he's hilarious. I mean, he's usually very funny. Sometimes he's retarded and sometimes he's hilarious. This is very funny. What's the sexual orientation called when it's a man who's convinced he's straight while openly despising women and actively wishing causing women harm? I'm not suggesting he's gay, but he sure as hell isn't straight. And then Dick Masterson is married. So funny, dude. That's so funny, bro. That's awesome.
That predispose us to different categories of temptation, you might say.
Yeah, the way I present it to my
Dick is mostly on the side. I don't know what that means. He's his own person. He's kind of similar to me. He's Hispanic, which is not similar to me, but he's Hispanic and he's funny and he does his own thing and there's a lot of overlap. And he likes Nick. I like Nick, but he does his own thing. Now he and I are obviously very different. He's more brown, so he's more about cooming. I'm kind of white, so I don't coom ever. I'm just kind of floating around like a white god around America, floating around above the brown hordes. But I like Dick Masterson a lot. I like Ralph a lot too.
family is that we are taught different languages of how to express our emotions. And if
So it's a fact. No, he's just an audio engineer, and audio engineers just boring. It's like if Joe Rogan gave Jamie a more active mic. It's the same thing, and that's totally fine. That's a specific type of person, or an actual engineer person. Now, audio engineering is kind of retarded because it's not real engineering. Any dark psychology tips? Steal money from people and give it back to them, and don't tell them you stole it. Destroy somebody's life and rebuild them, and then every time you destroy their life and rebuild them, they'll love you even more. But no, audio engineering is not real engineering. It's kind of just retarded. but it is real. Like, but I do it. I can be an audio engineer. It's retarded. It's not hard. It's just obnoxious and autistic. But there's a specific type of engineering person who's not that smart in terms of programming, in terms of actual engineering, math, like physics or calculus, or like building buildings. And that's an audio engineer. And they're very boring people because only a boring person could like that. But they're very stable because they're boring and they're fine. They're not gonna like make your life amazing, but they're also not gonna make your life horrible. And they're a good person to have around because they're boring and they're happy being boring, and that's totally fine. They'll cash your paycheck, watch some sports, watch some movies, go on hikes, and be comfy, and that's fine. They're just like kind of, they're not NPCs because they're not retarded, but they are NPCs because they're not destroying stuff. They're just boring, and that's fine.
If your vocabulary of emotional expression is violence and aggression, then that's the language you're going to teach everybody else.
Yeah, well, it also means that you don't know the
Should we
alternative.
learn to code on the side? Yeah, go for it. Coding is fun. Do some look up into Pico 8 and make a game. Make like tic-tac-toe or make a snake game. Or make like a Tetris game. Pico 8 is good because there's a lot of young people and it's a lot of fun. It's kind of like flash games for nowadays, apparently.
Precisely. And so it's really hard to express yourself in a calm, rational manner if the only language you speak in your head and outside and in your world is violence, aggression, and
That's how I talk.
toxicity. It's really hard then to
Yeah, well,
assess.
it's also difficult for people who are temperamentally more aggressive to learn how to integrate that
AI
aggression.
form is a money bag, but it's not. That's not coding. It's just buying like $7,000 worth of cards and motherboards and processors and RAM and CPUs and whatever, and just setting up stable diffusion. That's not really programming.
In a socialized
But that's
manner.
also an
So
option.
if you have a small child who's extroverted and disagreeable, they're going to push you and they're going to test constantly. And now if you take a firm
That's
tack and
scripting,
you're
not programming. That's hardware scripting and not programming.
sophisticated, you can help those children become socialized and competitive, in which case their proclivity to push can be, well, usefully channeled into, competitive victory, let's say. But it's hard to do that, especially when if the kid's particularly pushy.
And
Guys, you need to stop jerking off, dude, because I know it's funny, but you have so much lore and so much like weirdly specific stuff. 10-minute timeout. That you actually are a porn addict. You need to chill out, dude.
see that proclivity to push actually manifests itself in a large scale, from my estimation, from what I've seen doing what I
Stop
do,
jerking off.
in kids who are in that dark place, that are in that gray area of depression that might fall into the dark even further, that are trying to reach out for help.
Yeah.
The people that reach out to help too, they're going to test, they're going to push. And they're
Yeah,
going to
right.
see,
Definitely.
Paul's volume is fine. I'll make this.
Are you
Is this better for you, sir?
Are you lying to me like everybody else in my
Yeah,
life that
right.
said they were here for me
better
and
for
then
you?
they disappeared when
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
got hard.
yeah.
And so they're going to really test and test and test until you prove consistency. And so that proclivity to test, if you don't address that early on, it just sprouts and grows.
Right, it's going to be
until
exacerbated
one of
by
the main
betrayal.
Yeah, it turns into a main defense mechanism
Yeah.
and lifestyle that you're going to
Learn to code, learn
push
to
and
learn.
be aggressive to everybody until you can see that one person that actually can
Dude,
stand.
crypto's not coding. It's retarded. Crypto is scripting, if anything, and it's annoying and stupid, and like the documentation sucks, and it's annoying, and it's not real, actual good engineering because all of it is just trying to make money off of pump and dump. It's scripting. It's not programming.
Yeah, well, people who have been betrayed and rejected.
The only real programming, it's still scripting, is writing contracts. And that's like some logic, but that's still scripting. It's not programming.
efficiently can get to the point where they won't make a bond with anyone, right? There's research conducted, I can't remember the people who did it, on children who were separated.
Ethereum is kind of coding, but crypto is a platform. But it is there's like programming and there's things you could do, but it's always like 3,000-4,000 lines of code max most of the time, and that's like a crazy contract. And that's scripting. That's like a Python script you're writing. Yeah, that's not really programming. That's like, oh, I wrote a Python script, and that's fine. But it's not programming. It's not like architecture, because you're just writing one layer. You're not writing it's not full stack. You're not writing the server. You're not writing a front end. You're not writing compatibility stuff. You're just writing like machine code on one level, and you're not even interacting. Really, you're just writing a basic logic for an entirely. It's like scripting for like Minecraft or scripting for a mod for a game. It's not really programming. It's just modifying stuff, and it's retarded. But programming is retarded too. So it's good to learn, and it's good for logic, but it's not really. I don't really know if the logic you learn from programming for crypto really applies to the logic. The logic you learn for normal programming does apply to learning how to do like Solidity or whatever. But the logic you learn doing Solidity, if you haven't done programming before, doesn't really cross over too much with actual normal non-crypto programming, in my opinion. Because there's certain things like certain like logic, but that's very basic. You're not really learning any sort of architecture that's a front end, a back end. You're not really learning what you'd learn with if you were programming for Raspberry Pi or something. It's like building an extension for Brave or something. It's scripting.
Very young for
Got me
too
Raspberry Pi
long
to screw
from their
around with.
parents.
Have fun, dude.
And they go through a period of protest that's very intense to begin with. Of course, they're distressed about being separated. And then the protest behavior decreases, but it'll emerge sporadically. And then that'll decrease. And once the protest behavior has been eradicated completely, it's very difficult, even if the parent comes back, to reestablish contact. The children put up a barrier, which is akin to the barrier that you're describing, that's very difficult to pierce. And as you said, what'll happen too to children who are abandoned is that because they've been betrayed repeatedly and deeply and hurt very badly, is they will
I'm not half the volume of the video, dude.
To see if they can break the bond, to see if it's
You're just
reliable.
retarded, bro.
That can actually get to the point where you see this in conditions like borderline personality disorder, where the person will test everyone so completely that no one can actually put up with it.
And I see that quite a lot. And I think that the more we can, that's the advice that I give them when I get doing my talks, is that be that island of normal in the ocean of chaos for that person. That person is everybody. When I was in that spot, everybody in my life thought that I was either a monster or a project. You either wanted to fix me or you were afraid of me. And if neither one of those were a person. And so
well, a project is often something that people undertake for their own self-glorification.
Precisely. And if I'm just a mark on your checklist and I'm not actually, I'm an activity to you. I'm not a person you're engaging with in a rational response and listening to my and having a rational, reasonable discussion. I'm an activity on your checklist, and that means that I'm automatically under you. When we have activities and we're doing things, that activity is a thing we are doing.
Well, that's the toxicity of pity.
The toxicity of pity.
Demoralizing.
It is. It is. And the thing that my best friend did, and he's still my best friend to this day, was he was the one person that saved my life by treating me like I was a respectable person that deserved help.
When did you meet him?
I met him when I was 10.
Okay, so did you have friends before the age of 10?
Not really.
It's hard with an itinerant lifestyle. Like that.
I didn't have any real connections. And then even after that, once that slightly stabilized in my teen years, the moving down slowed down a little bit. I was able to stay places for slightly longer. I didn't really gather friends. I got what I called disaster groupies. They were people that wanted to kind of live vicariously through my darkness because they didn't really have anything.
You're in the trailer park.
So there was a bunch of.
Was that like a group of outcasts?
Yeah, it was a bunch of teen kids. Yeah. So maybe
you're in the trailer park,
kind of background, because looking back, it was a bunch of depressed kids trying to navigate depression without any adult supervision. But it was in reality, what was going on was there was a house that one of my classmates at school, his dad paid the rent and his dad bought all the food, but his dad didn't live there. So it was just my 16-year-old friend and his little brother that stayed there. And so that turned into just a flock house for a bunch of kids.
Right.
And so that was, and everybody else that was there.
There's no guidance.
No guidance whatsoever. And so that turned into where all the other kids had houses and had families and could go there. They were rebelling. They were trying to find their own way.
These are all the other kids.
All the other kids in the group. Yeah. They were like rebelling and stuff. I didn't have a house to go back to. I was going to go back and sleep in the field behind Casa Bonita in Denver. I was going to go try to steal free samples.
Sleeping in a field in Denver in the winter, that's not real, dude. You're not sleeping in a field in the winter in Denver, bro.
Out of the grocery store and evade my criminal family. If I did hit my family's house, it was to grab a little bit of clothes so I could get out of there before the violence started. So I wasn't going home to
You slept outside in the field one day in the summer.
ability. I was going to go live on the streets and I was going to go try to survive. They all got to go home to their houses. And so
Right.
in that,
So you were in this right, like neck deep, and they
Yeah.
were playing with it. just
yeah,
more-
exactly.
more-
Exactly.
yeah,
they,
yeah.
they were playing it with it. I was living it fully. And that kind of, they were like pushing me further off on the edge. It was like a real life Reddit forum. It was like,
Were you getting rewarded, so to speak, for your more
Yeah.
the darker parts of your personality?
yeah, rewarded, so to speak, in a social sense, where it's like it turns into like a party favor almost. Like, let me tell you the
Yeah.
craziness of what
It's
happened
your
to my family
specialty.
this day. Yeah,
Yeah, I had a friend like that who was extraordinarily comedic, and he was probably the funniest person I've ever met in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it got at one point it got to be a burden to him because that's what people expected. They expected him to be on and funny all
Yes.
the time.
That's just
yeah.
me, dude.
that time where I'm at a party and like, oh, so tell me what craziness your family went through today. I'm like, I don't want to talk about it, dude. I got cuts on my arms from it.
Well, cuts in your arms. He took a razor. And I want to know how I got these cuts in my arms. Mommy and Daddy were crazy.
I don't want to talk about this pain right now.
Man, watched the Joker once.
But it would turn into
Dark Knight.
to the fiction. But so when we're talking about that
The dark
leads into
jester.
the toxicity of what fed my own anger, toxicity, and depression with going into that spot. Because
Toxicity.
by that point, when that was
It's not toxic. It's called being an asshole. It's called being a jerk. And everybody does it sometimes. And you gotta say, oh, I'm being a jerk. I'm being an asshole. I'm being a dick. No, I'm not gonna do that anymore. So yeah, I'm sorry. I was being a real jerk. I was being inappropriate. I was being wrong. I'm being toxic. I was being a jerk. I was being an asshole. Sorry, dude. I was being a jerk. You know? I did that today, actually. I sent somebody a text that said, hey, sorry for being a jerk the other day. You know, I was bad. Sorry, my bad. I was being a dick. I was being a jerk. And that's what you do. You know, I wasn't being toxic. I was just being my behavior was unacceptable. I was being a jerk. And I said, yeah, sorry, man. I was being a jerk.
doing that when I was 14.
My girlfriend, sorry, man. I'm being a jerk. No.
Okay, what year is this?
So I was 14 years old. I was born in 1979. So we're talking
93.
93.
I don't know if he said fiction. I don't care.
Just
Dude.
to
He's a fat guy.
Just a place.
and you're in Denver at this
Let the
point?
fat nigger speak.
Denver.
And you were 14.
14 years old.
Yeah.
And that's when I finally left home because I couldn't deal with the violence and the crime and the beatings constantly and watching my mom stab my uncle in the gut with a doorknob. If you take apart a doorknob, the inside gear parts,
Pointy.
yeah, that makes a very dangerous weapon. Don't ever stab someone with it. And
No, it doesn't, because it's not a point. It's a rod. I've taken apart a doorknob before. I crack. It's basically just like a metal tube. It's like the width of, picture like a 3.5 millimeter, a little thicker than this, but like nickel, and it goes, or copper, and it goes, it's a little thicker than that, and it goes out, and it's not to a point. It's like a dowel. It's like a dowel shape at the end of it.
And so just violence like that constantly, like
What does constantly mean?
living in that fight or flight response every minute of every day.
Okay,
where
how often did you see events that were violent in your house?
3 or 4 times daily.
I would just, if I was gonna stab somebody, honestly, it would just be a knife. It wouldn't be a doorknob, inside of a doorknob. I probably would just take a knife and do it.
Kind of violence.
To the point where here's an example. I'm sitting in my bedroom and nobody had seen that I came home from school, or I think I was working a day job. I think I was 15 or 16 at the time. I walked in, sat down in my bedroom. Nobody heard that I was home. I picked up the game controller, was playing PlayStation for a second, heard a rumble outside my bedroom.
Yeah, I didn't even have a PlayStation growing up. I was more abused growing up, honestly. I didn't have PlayStation. If you have PlayStation, you're not abused, dude.
And I stand outside and my stepdad has
So wait,
my
you're
mom
sleeping
up
in
against
fields,
the
but you have
wall
a PlayStation?
by her throat, dangling like through 2
Wait,
feet
what?
off.
That's cool.
Stand outside and my stepdad has my mom up against the wall by her throat, dangling like through 2 feet off the ground.
It was like this. It was kind of like this vibe. It was almost like I watched this movie and made it up. Dude, I don't want to see the whole thing. Just show me the choke scene, dude. Why is it so quiet?
You've done what you planned to do. Stop. Stop now. Come back.
We all know that vibe, dude.
I love you.
Liar!
No.
You're with
Yeah, a few feet off the ground.
You
Like 7
brought
feet
me
off the
here to
ground.
Kill me.
No.
And this is when I said I was gonna be fat and bald and have a beard.
Let her.
Oh, simp. I can't watch this simp. Back in the old days, people were force choking everybody. Back in the 1950s, women were force choked repeatedly every day. And no white knights came around. But that was bad. I don't support force chokes.
He's choking her.
It would be simp.
And so I immediately grab him. I'm large. I just hit puberty, so I was big. I was getting into my body. Grabbed him.
Yeah, you've been getting in your body for a long
broke the
time.
microwave. Pushed him back, slammed him into the fridge, broke the fridge. Pushed him back into the back wall. Then I had him by his throat up against the wall, choking him. And now my mom is smashing plates over the back of my head for me to drop him. She's attacking me because.
Dude, this guy just lies about everything. I don't care.
Because I got into the fight. So I drop him, go back to my video game, pick up the game controller, keep on playing. Nothing happened. Like
You were. Now, let me ask you some questions about your personality. If you don't
totally.
mind. Okay. Introverted or extroverted?
then or now.
It's changed, eh?
Whoa. Really? A child has a different personality? I want to talk about Anon Demon Trolls. Dude.
I was alone, completely alone. And I had been alone for over a month. And I was in that field behind Casa Bonita. And I'd been living there for about a month. And I hadn't taken
How are you
clothes
eating?
off. I was stealing free samples from the grocery store at the top of the hill.
Did you ever engage in any criminal activity during that time?
Why would I just steal? I'm not going to steal samples if I'm living in a field. First off, I'm not going to live in a field. But I would just steal a shed from Home Depot. I would steal food, actual food, fruits and vegetables, loaves of bread, butter, knives. I would go into McDonald's. I would go into Chipotle, take napkins, cups of water, steal a cooler. I wouldn't steal samples.
Apart from that?
Yeah, I would walk up to the comic shop and steal a whole shelf full of comic books, walk down the street and hand them to the first kid I saw.
During that period, what about criminal behavior? apart from
Minor shoplifting. I would go to the stores, steal
At top of
candy
the
bars,
hill, used to tell fake story. Is that true? I don't know. That makes sense. He's just lying.
stuff like that. Nothing major, just minor shoplifting.
Okay.
But during that period, I was
stole a
doing
car.
it like egregiously and
You know what I would do though if I was homeless, had no money, I get dropped, knowing what I know now. I have a full stomach. First thing I would do if I was in an area, like a city area, I'd look for an old car, an old Ford, where you can just take a screwdriver. I'd go to a store, I get one of these screwdrivers, like this one, like one of the old fatheads. I'd break into a car, start the car because you can do the old Fords, early 90s. Steal the car. Now I have a car. Drive to like a neighboring town. What else would I do? You can steal food or whatever as you go along, but you're gonna want to get money for your gas. So what I would do then, assuming they haven't like found me yet, whatever, because I stole the car and it wasn't like I would probably wait for somebody to be outside with a pack of cigarettes or something. Or I'd go up to some black people probably. I'd go up to some black people and say, hey bro, can I, I'll shoplift something from the store for you for like $50 or $20 or something. They give me like $20. I go shoplift something for them, give it to them. Eventually that would work with somebody. Then you have gas money. Just do that. No, and just steal food. I would steal, depending on the car you steal like a shed, set up a shed, get a heater. Do that. Some shoplifting, selling the shoplifting stuff to people, doing some trades somehow. It'd be fine.
Blatantly.
Right, so that's part of the pattern.
Siphon it. You really can't siphon gas from a lot of cars now. It would have to be old cars. I guess you could drive to like a Walmart and siphon from some old car, but I think most cars now, I don't know if you can siphon gas.
Of self-destruction.
Yeah, I would go to the grocery store, steal an entire shelf worth of comic books, and the first kid that I would see walking down the street, I'd just hand them to him. Here, you want some comics?
Yeah, all you have to do is start with a screwdriver. Shoplift just a flathead from like Walmart. Easy. Because they're not going to pull you. They're not going to stop you. You can walk right out. They're not going to stop you.
Because that didn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was that.
You can have a screwdriver there. You can pop up with the flat. But then you're going to be dealing with, you're breaking into a car on a televised thing, and it's somebody's car, and it's probably a nicer car, and they're going to, track you down. Then people will be looking for you. You kind of want to minimize it because shoplifting is one of those things where you'll get noticed, especially if you do it repeatedly, but it's not going to be an active investigation. It's like, maybe a few months later down the line, if you go to the store, they're going to say, hey, buddy, what are you doing? And pull you in and you get like a minor charge. But if you're moving and shoplifting, it's fine. They're not going to catch you, especially from Walmart or Home Depot, that sort of stuff. And honestly, you could probably live a whole year just doing that easy without any problem. I think you could probably easily, without a sweat, as long as you can get a decent enough car that you don't get picked up on, and you drive to a different state, you probably would be able to go for a whole year very easily doing that.
That kind of crime.
Okay, so now you're out in the field. Mm-hmm. You're completely alone because you've cut yourself off from everybody.
And I wake up in the snow. And because I had been there for months, I hadn't taken my shoes off in weeks, but I also wasn't wearing socks. My feet were just rotting off of my body. I was surviving by eating free samples from the grocery store and stealing whatever food I can from up there and going down. I hadn't taken in the snow.
You're completely alone because you've cut yourself off from everybody.
And I wake up in the snow. And because I had been there for months, I hadn't taken my shoes off in weeks, but I also wasn't wearing socks. My feet were just rotting off of my body. Like I said, I was surviving by eating free samples from the grocery store and stealing whatever food I can from up there and going dumpster diving. I was trying to evade the police during school hours.
No, because you can't go into a store that has samples looking like you're homeless. Like, there's a level of shame. I guess he doesn't have shame because he's a pathological liar. There's a level of not bathing where it becomes very apparent. Not just the smell, just the way you look and the way you feel. An aura you have of dirt. After probably about a week, where people are going to start looking at you weirdly. Like, you go into a store and the owners will specifically look at you and follow you around because you look like somebody who's going to steal stuff. You just did dumpster diving, dude.
On school campus, but not going to class. So because I had to be, otherwise you'd get arrested for truancy. So I'm evading the police. And then I wake up in the snow. And it's so cold that the 2-block walk to get up to the grocery store, I wasn't just shaking, I was seizing. I was like, could barely breathe. Like my body could barely move. And I get up there and I'm looking in the mirror and I'm trying to wash my face off. And I'm like, I got to do something. I'm going to die. If I don't do something now, I'm going to die. And so across the street from the school I was at, there was a building that said,
why didn't you just want to die?
I don't know.
You're reminded to kill yourself.
Across the street from the school that I was nominally at was a building that said mental health. And I didn't know what it was for. I just knew that the sign said mental health.
What could that be for?
I knew the last time I warned them, they brought my mom in. I'm not doing that shit again. So I'm just going to go in cold. And so I went to
Why don't you just kill yourself, fatty?
Afternoon, and they had me meet a young lady. It was a counseling center. They had me meet a young lady. She was in her early 20s, I think. And I don't really remember much about that conversation because all I remember is the very end where she said, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I can't help you. And I walked out of that door and I remember vividly standing on that porch, and it was plans. I knew I had talked it through. I had already knew what I was going to do. And so right then the plans that I wanted to do crystallized in my head. I had talked them through with those disaster groupie friends, because when we were sitting with those disaster groupie friends, instead of talking about sports or girls or football, we talk about killing people. We talk about, so if you're going to shoot 10 people, how would you do it? If you're going to shoot up a school, what would
no guys ever talking about that ever.
you do? And that was the fiction of the group. And so over the years, I had already
And based on what, why did that be? Now you
just-
said you were at the center of that.
All right, let's get back to this.